Before that, it's time for Another Audience with Max Wall, performed by Tony Lidington in front of an invited audience at the Concert Artists Association in London.
Had you just 2 days, you lazy animal? Man who sold you said you were fine. I don't like your ways, you lazy animal. You just stand around and blink your eyes. Reckon you have Satan right inside of you, teaching you to lead this life of sin. 'Cause each time I try to get alongside of you, you just slash your hind legs out, then turn around and grin. Stubborn old mule, good for nothing pup. Guess you'd blame your ma and pa the way they brought you up. Doggone your soul, hide your ugly face from me. Hide your ugly face from me. I've had thousands of requests from 1 or 2 people, my father and mother, to do my famous imitations. Here I give you an imitation of a Cocker Spaniel. Now, Napoleon Bonaparte. And the Eiffel Tower. Each one quite brilliant and effortless on radio. You're out there wondering what I'll do next. I wish someone would tell me. Life has a habit of jumping about and scaring the hell out of you, like some cavorting dark spider. Harry, Stella's second husband and my manager, mentor and stepfather, died of cancer at our home in 1929. I can still hear his laboured breathing and picture his skeletal, emaciated body, his handsome face gaunt, with hollow cheeks and long, bony fingers, just as my father looked 9 years earlier. The day came when the breathing stopped, and there was a dead, horrible silence, the silence of finality. There was no applause or return through the curtains, however appreciative the audience. I was heartbroken. It was my 21st birthday. I was now alone in the world with Mother, Stella. I was a mummy's boy, and she was a veritable stage mother, demanding, overbearing, and suffocatingly overprotective. She was a fixer, a femme fatale, happy to use her charm and sexuality for any family advantage. Bank managers, doctors, estate agents, vets. In fact, just about every professional body fell prone to her attributes. She took over the handling of all my business affairs, and the result was disastrous. The whole of show business knew about Max Wall's mum, and it lost me both engagements and respect. But I wouldn't hear a word against her in those days, and although I was her meal ticket, she was my world, and we would let no one else share in it. Only a year or 2 later, Stella met a guitarist, Bill Tringham from the band The Happy Boys. He was a good deal younger than her, but he moved in with us and they eventually married. It was odd at first because my new stepfather was only 4 years older than myself, but I learned to play jazz guitar from him, and he made Stella happy. She, meanwhile, encouraged me to have lots of girlfriends, and the biological studentship I had begun under Harry's expert advice continued apace. But Stella was determined I should never get married. "You'll not make a good husband. You may be fond of sex, but you are sadly lacking in the other necessary ingredients that go towards a happy, well-balanced marriage." Her control and constant refrain had its effect. For unlike most normal young men, I remained at home with her until I reached my 30s, and my associations with girls stayed transient, superficial, and entirely sexual. Our relationship was intense. We had many genuinely happy days, a dreamlike cocoon of love between mother and son, but there was something basically neurotic in it. Stella couldn't bear to be opposed, and she would go on nagging and provoking and niggling and worrying at me about some little thing until, bam! I would explode in a fit of rage and smash the place up while she stood calmly by, watching her baby's temper tantrum blaze until it burned out. She seemed to enjoy her triumph, and I would collapse against her in dreadful remorse and guilt. She too could flare up, burn out, and play the big reconciliation scene, so I guess we were both victims of an inner fire that smouldered and erupted like human volcanoes that could tip momentarily into madness. In all that destructiveness, between our two opposing forces, amongst the wreckage, I can pick out fragments of intense happiness and pieces of heartbreaking sorrow, like glimpses of daylight through rubble and the senseless suffocation of innocence. Pardon me for introducing such a harsh note. There's always a hard edge somewhere. Well, there is with me. Censé. I remember doing a successful circuit of the Moss Empires, and they engaged me for a West End review with Vic Oliver and the lovely Frances Day. Frances and I took up together and would dine at the Savoy and mix with the London set. Stella, of course, was beside herself. She loved the reflected glory. But I haven't any time for that ballyhoo. To me, it's all a mirage. Nevertheless, Stella insisted, "You must have a house in London." So a tall, fully furnished house was rented in Knightsbridge. But in reality, I stayed living with Mother, and the Knightsbridge property was left just as it was, quite unoccupied, while I commuted to and from town each day. If I wanted to stay in town overnight, Stella would throw a fit over the phone, and the result would be the same. I would give way, make my excuses to Frances, and travel back home. Then came the war. The show with Frances came off, along with most of the others in the West End. Mother said she was worried that the government might freeze all assets and that I should sign any endowments over to her. Thinking nothing of it, of course, I agreed. One day, I watched a dogfight between a British and German plane in the blue skies over Leicester Square. Looking up and out, it was clear to me that my silly antics of clowning and petty family feuds were nothing compared with those vapour trails marking the battle between freedom and tyranny. The pugnacious Scottish pride of my father Jack and the indignant Jewish anger of my first stepfather Harry welled up inside me, and I volunteered straight away for the RAF. "Your maths are terrible," said the group captain. "You didn't even know that 3 + 2 makes 5. I replied. "I thought that was 4 + 1. I told you it would be marvellous material." They accepted me as a wireless operator air gunner, or WOP-AG. I was ready to join those trailblazers in the sky and fight for Jack and Harry, whilst still entertaining and performing around my military duties. In December 1939, I was offered a spot on Bandwagon, the touring show of Arthur Askey's hit radio series. Askey had a pantomime commitment, and arrangements had been made for him to be released from the tour and then re-engaged once the pantomime had finished. The producer of the Bandwagon tour was Jack Hilton, who had long since given up his orchestra. He asked me to deputise for Arthur while he fulfilled his pantomime commitment. I accepted and played Askey's part opposite Stinker Murdoch. Amongst the supporting acts on the bill was a young dancer called Ernie Wise. But more importantly, although I didn't know it at the time, was the Marion Polar Trio, a dancing act led by Marion Polar. She was a trained ballerina with a gorgeous figure, red hair, and very sexy, just like me. The old chemicals began bubbling away, and my student experiments graduated into more research. However, She was already married to a much older bloke, but it was not happy. I was in love. I took her to meet Stella, and all went well until she realised that I was serious about Marion. Then the dogfight began. I told her that as soon as Marion's divorce came through, we would be married. "If you get married, don't bring your brats along to me," Stella retorted. For her, everything she knew was twisting about. Now her easy existence was under threat from a new trajectory. I was determined to break away from Stella, so I moved in with Marion at her mother's and travelled back home to pick up my things. But my bedroom door was locked. I launched my attack. "I want my money!" "You've got no money," she shot back. I bore down on her. "My endowment policies, insurances, everything I've worked for, where are they?" "You don't own any of it anymore," she roared. And the clear skies filled with the screaming sounds of anger and bitter fury. In the terrible scene which ensued, Stella held me down, while my stepfather, Bill, punched and kicked me senseless. When they finally released me, I grabbed my things and drove away, while Stella hurled anything she found to hand at my departing car. Now the skies could clear. When Marion's divorce was finalised, I was given special leave, but I was still on active service, so it was hard trying to fulfil my military and marital duties. Due to my medical examinations, I was declared unfit to fly, but was retained as an aircraft hand for general duties. The bottom of the bill, even in the RAF. At the same time, I was entertaining troops 2 or 3 times a week and learning how to drill men. In the Air Force, we had to do 2 things at once. Oh, yes. When the bombs were dropping, we did 3. I'll leave it with you. Many knew I was an entertainer, so I was naturally expected to go into a comic pantomime drill routine like that of Fred Carno. I enjoyed it, for it was just like acting. The rising and falling cadence of voice, the timing of commands, the satisfaction of a well-turned-out, smart, efficient squad, the neat precision of the steps, it was all just another performance. Out of these experiences, I created a new character, forged from the absurdity and pettiness and insanity of war. Professor Wolofsky. But you'll meet him next time. Saved up all my money just to get you, 'cause I thought you'd help me on my way. Now I curse that evil day I met you. You just ignore everything that I say. Stubborn old mule, good for nothing pup. Guess you'd blame your ma and pa the way they brought you up. Doggone your soul, hide your ugly face from me. Hide your ugly face from me.
That was an audience with Max Wall, performed by Tony Lidington, accompanied on the guitar by Jake Rodriguez. It was a peer production for BBC Radio 4, directed by David Blount.